You're not a nice person if you think boundaries are harsh. You're a people pleaser who sells themselves for others. Hello, my name is Julie and welcome back to my channel. And listen, I get it. A lot of us don't know how to set boundaries because we were not taught to set boundaries when we were children. As children, we were taught to care for other people, especially the elderly. We were taught to support them and care for them and treat them with respect and be kind. So when we were children, we were conditioned that people matter more than we do. Especially if you've dealt with abandonment or neglect issues and wounds in your life, then you know deep down that the moment you set boundaries, there's a potential loss of people. People might abandon you because now you're not pleasing them and you're putting yourself first. So you end up pleasing them to not be abandoned, but in the process, you are abandoning yourself. But I believe that everyone has boundaries. There's no such thing as someone having zero boundaries. However, and this is something I dealt with as well, our boundaries tend to come with extremely high limits, meaning that we only tend to set boundaries the moment things go too far. Only when we're about to get hurt, then we set the boundary, as opposed to setting it from the first instance or from the first disrespect. I struggled with setting boundaries all my life because I'm anxious and I'm a people pleaser. And it was actually my ex-best friend that told me, you need to learn how to set better boundaries. Because your boundaries, they just come with such a high limit to what you can handle before you even set it. And this happened after what I call my dentist story. So back when I was 19, I was visiting my dentist, fixing my teeth. And on my last session, he suggested that we just drink coffee at the office. I'm like, okay. However, the conversations were getting more sexual. So we started talking about dating. I was freshly single at the time. And then he started talking about Tinder and then his sex life. And then it got too sexual. However, that was someone that I used to trust at the time because I was his patient for like 2-3 years, almost, maybe like 2 years. And he was a witness at my cousin's marriage. So he also knows my family. And when things would get too uncomfortable and I would like feel it, he would just change the conversation. I did not set a single boundary by then. However, after 30 minutes, he was, trying to sleep with me when I was 19 and he was 36, 37, making him I said no, I want to go home. So he offered to drop me. I'm like, okay, can you just drop me at this location? Because the clinic was a bit far. And of course, before I left, he tried again. I said no, but again, like, after what? And then at the end, he asked for a kiss and I was feeling so awkward. So I just opted for like a kiss on the cheek and I left. However, that story traumatized me for such a long time. And I didn't need to go through that if I had just set my boundaries earlier. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I was trying to be a nice person, but I didn't need to be a nice person when I didn't feel comfortable or safe. See, that's the point of having boundaries. It's not for you to be harsh or for you to be rude. Having boundaries is about setting limits so that you feel comfortable and you feel safe and respected and valued within the relationship. And a healthy relationship requires both parties to set boundaries so that they both feel safe within the relationship. And that's why setting boundaries is such a crucial tool in healing, especially if you're an anxious person or a people pleaser. Because healing is all about going back into yourself. You know how we were conditioned as children to care about people more than we care about ourselves? Healing is all about, no, now it's time that I also prioritize myself and realize that I also matter, not just you. And once you learn how to start setting boundaries in your life, you will learn that setting boundaries is not harsh and it's not rude to the right people. The right people will not hate you for setting boundaries, but the wrong ones will. Because once you set boundaries, you don't allow people to have the same access to you as they did before. And you end up also prioritizing yourself. So you're not selling yourself and depleting yourself for them. See, the wrong friend is going to be pissed when you set that boundary. And they're going to think that you're selfish. And they might even tell you, like, oh, I'm always there for you, but you're never there for me. They try to guilt trip you, they try to blame you because now you haven't offered them the same access you used to as before, especially if you were extremely supportive, and they can't use you whenever you can. However, the right person, someone that actually cares about you, is going to tell you, you know what, I understand that you cannot make it, you cannot help me. I'll try to figure it out on my own, but just take care of yourself and rest. When you set that boundary, you're not rude. They don't take it as you attacking them, but rather they still care about you. So they will end up respecting that boundary. And in the future, when they set boundaries with you, then you should also do the same with them. Boundaries form healthy relationships. Toxic relationships, on the other hand, suffer when you set boundaries. So yes, do you end up losing people when you set boundaries? Of course, but you will always end up losing the wrong people, not the right ones. Because the wrong ones will consistently try to break your boundaries, since it no longer works for them, it no longer fits, and they cannot take you for granted. If someone consistently breaks your boundaries, then that also means that they don't have respect for you. To respect that you have boundaries and to appreciate that you're setting them because you're seeking comfort and safety and value within the relationship. I've lost so many people for not respecting my boundaries, but the existing relationships that I already had in my life when I started to set boundaries, they actually became stronger. And then they started setting boundaries themselves, and we both became comfortable and safe within the relationship that we trust each other. But how do you set your boundaries? Number one, know your limits. What is it that you don't like? What drains you? Or what do you need from that person in order to feel safe? Once you've asked yourself these questions, list down the things that you don't like or like your limits when it comes to your personal space, your physical space, your time, your money, or even your emotions. And once you know your limits, these limits are your boundaries. So the next thing you want to do is you want to communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully to people. So let's say you don't like being hugged by people and someone leans in to give you a hug. This is the perfect opportunity for you to set that boundary by, leaning back a bit and telling them like, hey, can you please not hug me? I'm just not comfortable with it. It's about being direct, being respectful, but also not overly explaining yourself. So by just saying, you're not comfortable with it, that's enough. You don't need to mention why or how or when. No. But even when you communicate your boundaries, it doesn't mean that you won't be facing some pushback from people. And it doesn't mean that deep down you're gonna stop feeling like you're selfish or you're being rude. So number 3 is you need to self-validate. When you start to feel bad or guilty for setting a boundary, then you need to also validate yourself between you and yourself. And tell yourself that you can say no as a person. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to have your limits. And you're not being selfish by asking them to respect your boundaries and your space. So when someone tries to push back when you set a boundary or even break the boundary another time later on, then number 4, you need to follow through. You need to reinstate your boundary and set your consequences. See, a boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. You can tell someone that you don't like what they're doing, but if they do it again and you just tell them, I don't like what you're doing, it's just a suggestion at this point because they will end up doing it again. You will just say, I don't like what you're doing. It's important that when you set a boundary, you don't just do it once because some people are going to end up pushing back, seeing if you're going to break, if you're going to forget the boundary, or some people might just simply forget and end up doing something again by mistake. So you need to be assertive and you need to reinstate the boundary. And you need to add a consequence because again, a boundary without a consequence, only said once, is a suggestion. It's not a boundary. And consequences don't need to be scary. So yes, you can have a consequence of blocking someone, cutting them off. You can have a consequence of distancing yourself and not talking to them as often. But a consequence can be as simple as, if you're going to yell at me, then I'm gonna leave the conversation. So you're not cutting them off or distancing yourself, but you're leaving a conversation. A common example with setting boundaries can also happen during breakups, in which after you break up from that person, you don't block them because you don't want to, but at the same time, that person keeps reaching out to you and sending you messages and apologizing and just talking to you when you don't want them to talk to you anymore. That's when you need to set a boundary. So the first time you set it, you might just tell them like, please don't contact me because the relationship has ended. However, they keep contacting you and calling you and messaging you. This is when you need to follow through, reinstate a boundary with consequence. So this time you would tell them like, if you're going to keep contacting me, I'm going to block you because I don't want to speak to you after the breakup. If you just come up to them and tell them, please don't contact me, please don't contact me, please don't contact me, guess what? They're going to keep contacting you because you're not setting a consequence and they're getting away with it. So it's important that you set consequences within your boundaries so that the other person knows that in case they break the boundary, something's going to happen. And boundaries need to be set in different areas of our lives. In fact, there are 7 different types of boundaries that we need to be setting. Number 1, emotional boundaries. So for example, if you're having an emotional reaction due to a conversation with a friend, that you might ask them that you need some time off to process the conversation. Or another boundary that you can set is that you're not responsible for other people's emotions. So if someone is overreacting to something that happened, it's not your responsibility to help them and fix them. 2, physical boundaries, and especially when people come too close to you. So that could be, don't hug me, or I need to rest because I'm tired. 3, time boundaries, which are related to your own time. And that could be, at work, if you finish at 5 p.m., then you don't work after 5 p.m. That's when you finish work. Or if you're busy during the weekend and your friends ask you to go out with them, then you can tell them, I'm not available this weekend. Maybe the weekend after we can go out. And that's a boundary that you have set for them. 4, material boundaries, which are related to your own money. So whether you choose to lend money or not, or even related to your own assets and to your own material possessions, like your clothes, borrowing clothes. 5, sexual boundaries related to your own sexual needs and your own sexual energy, such as no means no. And lastly, you have your digital boundaries, which can relate to, social media, such as not having your friends share your social page name to other people, or having your friends not share pictures of you online, and even blocking people and blocking your exes so they don't contact you and stalk you and you don't get to stalk them. Based off of these 7 types of boundaries, figure out what are your limits within these boundaries and get to setting your boundaries, because you deserve to feel safe and comfortable in all your relationships. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.